Thank you for joining us for the Title I Part A Within-LEA Allocations Training, Part 1 of 2, Campus Eligibility. This training was provided via webinar on October 31st, 2023.
Presentation is intended solely to provide general information and guidance to Texas LEAs and reflects the TEA's current understanding of the presentation topics and applicable federal guidance. The content of this presentation is subject to change as a result of further potential information and guidance provided by federal agencies with regulatory oversight of this program. This presentation does not constitute legal advice, and LEAs are therefore advised to seek legal counsel regarding the information and guidance provided in this presentation before acting on such information and guidance.
In this training, participants will gain a better understanding of the steps used to determine Title I Part A campus eligibility, campus-based programs eligibility criteria, and resources for determining campus and campus-based programs eligibility.
The Title I Part A requirements referenced in this presentation are based on the most current reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act. The intent and purpose of the Title I Part A program is to provide all children a significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high-quality education, and to close educational achievement gaps. Throughout the presentation, we will be making reference to the acronym LEA, which stands for Local Education Agency. When we refer to LEAs, that would include school districts and charter school systems.
The SC 5000 Title I Part A Campus Selection Schedule is required if an LEA applied for Title I Part A funds and such funds are budgeted on the Budget Schedule 6001, the Program Budget Summary in the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant Application. In this schedule, the LEA is providing information for each campus as it relates to whether the campus will be a Title I Part A campus. The SC 5000 schedule can be accessed in the eGrants system from the table of contents of the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant Application. For your reference, on the screen are screenshots of the first 2 pages of the instructions document. This can be a helpful resource when completing the SC 5000.
Before looking at the data in row 3, let's take a look at the requirements for determining poverty counts to be reported on the SC 5000 for the LEA and for campuses, as referenced in the previous slide. The requirements that will follow related to poverty measures can be found in Section 1113 of the ESSA statute. It's important to note that an LEA with an enrollment of fewer than 1,000 students is exempt in statute from having to use the poverty measures to determine which of its schools receive Title I funds. Such an LEA may use other criteria, such as academic performance or the grade span of its schools, to determine which of its schools receive Title I funds. Or it may choose to allocate Title I funds to all of its schools. Similarly, if an LEA is consisting of only one school, the LEA does not have to follow the requirements of Section 1113 that pertain to determining which of its schools receive Title I funds and the amount of their allocations, because its only school will receive the amount the LEA has available to allocate to public schools.
To determine the number of public school students from low-income families, the ESSA statute provides an LEA the option to use the number of public school children eligible for free or reduced price lunch under the Richard B. Russell National School Lunch Act including children counted through the Community Eligibility Provision Program, in families receiving assistance under the state program funded under Title IV Part A of the Social Security Act, otherwise known as Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, eligible to receive medical assistance under the Medicaid program, ages 5 to 17 in poverty as counted in the most recent LEA level census poverty data approved by the department, or counted by the LEA using a composite of any of the above measures. If an LEA chooses to use ages 5 through 17 in poverty data, be advised that because census data are generally not available at the school level, if an LEA uses this measure, it would most likely be part of a composite with one or more of the additional measures that are noted here.
An LEA must use the same measure of poverty to identify eligible school attendance areas in schools, to rank areas in schools, and to determine the allocation for each area and school. For the year of data used to determine poverty counts of public schools, an LEA uses the most recently available data, which will be from the previous school year in most cases. For example, with respect to Title I school allocations for the 2023-2024 school year, an LEA that uses free and reduced price lunch data will generally use data collected during the 2022-2023 school year. Now that we have looked at determining the poverty measure to be used to allocate funds to Title I Part A eligible campuses, I want to reference Section 1112 of the ESSA statute that includes requirements related to local education agency plans. Each LEA is required to develop a Title I Part A LEA program plan. The Title I Part A LEA program plan requirements can be included in the state-required district improvement plan. The LEA program plan includes the following requirements: timely and meaningful consultation of stakeholders, coordination, activities that address student academic achievement as it relates to meeting the challenging state academic standards, periodic review and revisions, and 13 statutorily required descriptions. One of the 13 descriptions is related to the process the LEA will use to determine poverty counts. The Title I Part A LEA plan shall describe the poverty criteria that will be used to select school attendance areas under Section 1113. An LEA will want to be sure to include such a description in its plan.
The basis of eligibility options for each campus on the SC 5000 includes none, residing, which is the number of students residing in the attendance area, enrollment, which is the number of students enrolled on a campus. If this basis is selected, the date used to determine the enrollment number must be the same for all campuses. Feeder pattern is another option, optional method, and direct certification.
Before we take a look at the processes for ranking and identifying eligible campuses, I wanted to clarify the difference between the eligibility requirements for overall Title I Part A eligibility and the eligibility requirements for operating a school-wide program. In order for a campus to operate a campus-based Title I Part A program, it must first meet overall Title I eligibility requirements. On the following slides, we will be discussing the criteria for overall Title I Part A eligibility. Once overall Title I Part A eligibility has been established for a campus, then it can be decided whether the campus is eligible to operate a school-wide program, or if the campus will be operating a targeted assistance program. We will go over the eligibility criteria for operating a school-wide program later in the presentation. ESSA statute requires an LEA with at least 1,000 enrolled students to rank all of its school attendance areas according to their percentage of public school students residing in the attendance area who are from low-income families. ESSA statute also permits an LEA to rank its schools according to their percentage of public school students from low-income families who are enrolled in the schools. We will now take a look at 4 steps an LEA takes when ranking and identifying eligible campuses. The LEA can rank its campuses in order of poverty without regard to the grade span they serve. The LEA identifies any campuses above 75% poverty. The LEA has the option to identify certain high schools between 75 and 50% poverty. The LEA then has several options for identifying and serving its remaining campuses.
In step 2, the LEA begins a process of ranking and identifying eligible campuses by ranking campuses in order of poverty without regard to the grade span they serve. In this example, the LEA included the schools listed by letter of the alphabet, grades served, student enrollment, number of students eligible for free and reduced price lunch, which is the poverty measure selected by the LEA, and poverty percentage. The LEA sorted this listing by poverty percentage, ranking the campus with the highest poverty percentage at the top and the campus with the lowest poverty percentage towards the bottom. After an LEA has ranked all of its schools by percentage of poverty, the ESSA statute requires the LEA to first allocate, in rank order of poverty, Title I funds to the schools above 75% poverty, including any middle schools or high schools. Thus, before an LEA can decide how to determine eligibility for any school with a poverty percentage that does not exceed 75%, it must allocate Title I funds to all its schools above 75%. In this example, the LEA would identify the campus or campuses above 75%. Since Public School A is the only campus above 75% poverty, it is the first campus that is to be allocated Title I Part A funds.
If a campus meets Title I Part A eligibility based on having a low income percentage above 75%, the basis of eligibility noted on the SC 5000 would be either residing or enrollment based on the data the LEA used to calculate the low income percentage reported for the campus on the SC 5000.
After an LEA has ranked all of its campuses by percentage of poverty and identified campuses with a poverty percent above 75%, if funds remain, an LEA may choose to serve high schools with a poverty percentage between 50% and 75% in rank order of poverty. The implementation of this option occurs before serving any other grade span.
If a high school campus meets Title I Part A eligibility based on having a low income percentage above 50% based on this option, the basis of eligibility noted on the SC 5000 would either be residing or enrollment based on the data the LEA used to calculate the low income percentage reported for the campus on the SC 5000.
After an LEA has ranked all of its campuses by percentage of poverty, identified campuses with a poverty percent above 75%, and has determined if high schools above 50% poverty will be served, if funds remain, the LEA has several other options for serving the remaining campuses.
After an LEA has served all of its schools with a poverty rate above 75%, if funds remain, the LEA may serve lower-ranked eligible schools as per several other options. These options, referenced under the Basis of Eligibility column, include the LEA poverty percentage, serving a campus above 35% poverty, feeder pattern, optional method, and direct certification.
The first two options we will take a look at are the LEA poverty percentage and 35% or greater poverty options. A school is eligible for Title I funds if its poverty percentage is as high as the LEA's poverty percentage or at the LEA's discretion at least 35%.
We will first take a look at an example for an LEA with a poverty percentage that is less than 35%. If an LEA's poverty percentage is 20%, any school in the LEA that has a poverty percentage of at least 20% is eligible to receive Title I Part A funds to operate a campus-based program. Next, we'll take a look at an example for an LEA with a poverty percentage of 35% or greater. If an LEA has a poverty percentage of 55%, the campuses that are eligible for Title I are those with a poverty percentage that equals or exceeds the 55%, unless the LEA chooses to make eligible all schools with a poverty percentage of 35% or more. In this case, since the LEA's poverty percentage is 35% or greater, they can serve campuses all the way down to 35% if they choose to do so. As we will discuss later when we take a look at allocating funds to eligible schools, meeting the criteria for eligibility does not guarantee that a school will receive Title I funds from its LEA. Receipt of funds depends on the amount of an LEA's allocation and school poverty rankings, the per pupil amount the LEA allocates to each school, and in some cases, the grades that a school serves. We will discuss serving campuses with a poverty percentage below 35% later, which will require the LEA to utilize the 125% rule.
Let's take a look at an example where the LEA will be using the LEA's poverty percentage, which is below 35%, to determine Title I Part A eligibility for its campuses. Based on a previous example, we had already determined that School A met the eligibility criteria since it was above the 75% poverty threshold. Remember that campuses with a poverty percentage above 75% are automatically Title I Part A eligible and are the first to be required to be allocated Title I Part A funds. Based on the data in this table, the LEA's poverty percentage is 34%. Thus, schools G, C, D, O, B, F, I, E, and H are all eligible to receive Title I Part A funds because their poverty percentage is as high as the LEA's poverty percentage. Now let's take a look at an example where the LEA's poverty percentage is 35% or greater. Based on a previous example, we had already determined that School A met the eligibility criteria since it was above the 75% poverty threshold. Based on the data in this table, the LEA's poverty percentage is 36.2%. Schools G, C, D, O, B, F, and Q are eligible because their poverty percentage is greater than or equal to the LEA poverty percentage of 36.2%. Since an LEA can make campuses Title I Part A eligible down to at least 35% if they choose to do so, in this example, the LEA can make campuses I&E eligible since the poverty percentage for each campus is at least 35%.
If a campus meets Title I Part A eligibility based on one of the two options referenced here and is to be a Title I Part A served campus, the basis of eligibility noted on the SC 5000 would be either residing or enrollment based on the data the LEA used to calculate the low income percentage reported for the campus on the SC 5000. Let's take a look at an example of the SC 5000 for a campus that has a low income percentage that is 35% or greater and less than the LEA's low income percentage. On this SC 5000, Edgar ISD reported that its low income percentage is 39.54%. For Edgar Elementary, the LEA reported a low income percentage of 36.24%. Although the campus low income percentage is less than the LEA's low income percentage, the campus is still eligible to receive a Title I Part A campus allocation because the campus low income percentage is 35% or greater. Now let's take a look at an example of the SC 5000 for a campus that has a low income percentage that is less than 35% but greater than the LEA's low income percentage. On this SC 5000, ESSA ISD reported that its low income percentage is 32.54%. For ESSA Junior High, they reported a low income percentage of 33.24%. Although the campus's low income percentage is less than 35%, the campus is still eligible to receive a Title I Part A campus allocation because the campus low income percentage is equal to or greater than the LEA's low income percentage of 32.54%.
We will now look at the feeder pattern option. This option can be used to establish a middle or high school campus's Title I Part A eligibility by projection, based on the number of low-income students in the elementary school attendance areas that feed into that campus. The LEA must maintain the following documentation for any campus whose eligibility is established via feeder pattern: low income numbers and enrollment from those campuses that comprise the feeder pattern for the campus in question. It is important to note that before an LEA may use feeder patterns to determine the poverty percentage of secondary schools, the LEA must conduct outreach to its secondary schools to inform them of the option, and a majority of its secondary schools must approve the use of feeder patterns. A secondary school would be defined as a middle school and high school.
If a campus meets the Title I Part A eligibility based on the option referenced here and is to be a Title I served campus, the basis of eligibility noted on the SC 5000 would be feeder pattern. The LEA would report the projected low income percentage for the campus based on the feeder pattern. The LEA would maintain locally for documentation purposes the list of feeder campuses, their low income numbers, and enrollment from those campuses that comprise the feeder pattern for the campus in question. On this SC 5000, MOE ISD is trying to establish Title I eligibility for MOE Middle School. MOE Middle School has a low income percent of 34.24%. MOE ISD reported that the LEA's low income percentage is 46.23%. since MOE middle school's low income percentage is not equal to or greater than 35% and is not equal to or greater than the LEA's low income percentage, the campus is not Title I eligible using the LEA poverty percent or the 35% options. So the LEA is now going to try to use the feeder pattern option to establish Title I eligibility for MOE middle school by projection. Since MOE Elementary is the only campus that feeds into MOE middle school, the LEA can use the feeder campus's low income percentage to establish eligibility for MOE middle school. If the LEA chooses to use the feeder pattern to establish Title I eligibility for MOE middle school, they would need to include the campus's low income percentage for the feeder pattern that makes the campus Title I eligible, and they would need to select feeder pattern as the basis of eligibility for the campus in question.
The optional method is another way in which a campus may establish Title I Part A eligibility. For a campus that is unable to establish Title I Part A eligibility using the number of students residing in its attendance area, the optional method may be selected if the percentage of enrolled low-income students is equal to or greater than the low-income percentage of a participating campus.
Now let's take a look at an SC 5000 tip for a campus using the optional method to establish Title I eligibility. If a campus meets Title I Part A eligibility based on the option referenced here and is to be a Title I Part A served campus, the basis of eligibility noted on the SC 5000 would be optional method.
The final option we will take a look at is the direct certification option. This option may be used if an LEA is using Community Eligibility Provision or Department of Agriculture reported numbers and percentages. Identified students are eligible through the Richard B. Russell National School Lunch Act. This option is selected only when the LEA is solely using direct certification data as a poverty measure. Keep in mind that the number of students directly certified is a subset of the total number of students eligible for free and reduced priced meals. Thus, if an LEA has non-CEP campuses with a poverty count based on the number of students approved for free and reduced price meals, and CEP campuses with a poverty count based on, for example, students directly certified using SNAP data, the LEA must use a common poverty metric to rank order its campuses and allocate Title I funds on an equitable basis. This would require the use of a direct certification multiplier.
Now let's take a look at an SC 5000 tip for a campus using direct certification to establish Title I eligibility. If a campus meets Title I Part A eligibility based on the option referenced here and is to be a Title I Part A served campus, the basis of eligibility noted on the SC 5000 would be direct certification. This concludes the overview of the basis of eligibility options. The additional eligibility column was revised for the 2023-2024 application to separate overall Title I eligibility options and school-wide eligibility options. Previously, the items in this column were checkboxes. Now they're radio buttons, which require only one selection. This column will only be enabled if the campus low income percentage entered for the campus is less than 35% and the campus has a status of school-wide or targeted assistance. For each campus where the column is enabled, select one of the options to reflect the additional eligibility method that the campus is using to establish overall Title I eligibility. There were changes made to the selection options for 2023-2024. The two school-wide eligibility options were removed and added to another column. EdFlex individual programmatic waiver and one-year transition remain as options, and grade span grouping and none were added. As previously mentioned, this column will only be enabled if the campus low-income percentage entered for the campus is less than 35% and the campus has a status of school-wide or targeted assistance. The only time that none is acceptable as a selection is when an LEA is exempt from the rank and served requirements because the LEA has less than 1,000 students or only operates one campus, or when the campus low-income percentage is greater than or equal to the LEA's low-income percentage. For specific information and definitions for each of the options, please see the SC 5000 Schedule Instructions and the SC 5000 Guidance Handbook. After an LEA has served all of its campuses with a poverty rate above 75%, if funds remain, the LEA may choose to serve lower-ranked eligible schools according to several other options. These options referenced under the additional Title I eligibility column include grade span grouping, one-year transition, EdFlex individual programmatic waiver, and none. Let's take a look at the grade span grouping option. In addition to the district-wide ranking method that we looked at earlier, an LEA may determine eligibility within grade spans and choose which grade spans to serve. In doing so, the LEA may use its district-wide poverty percentage or the percentage of poverty for the relevant grade spans. If a grade span poverty percentage is 35% or greater, the LEA may also identify as eligible within the grade span any school with a poverty percentage of at least 35%. When using a grade span option, if there is only one school in a grade span, that school is eligible for Title I funds regardless of its poverty percentage, provided that any school above 75% poverty has received a Title I allocation. We will now take a look at a couple of examples where an LEA uses the grade span grouping option.
This example shows School Q as the only school in a grade span, which is a high school. School Q is eligible for Title I funds because it is the only school in the high school grade span. Please note that if the LEA chooses to determine Title I eligibility using the grade span grouping option, and there is only one school in a grade span, that school is eligible for Title I funds, provided that any school above 75% poverty has received a Title I allocation. In this example, the LEA grouped all the elementary schools together in one grade span. The poverty percentage for the elementary school grade span in this example is 32.8%. Schools G, C, D, B, F, I, E, and H are Title I eligible because their poverty percentage is at least as high as the grade span's poverty percentage of 32.8%. The other schools are ineligible because their poverty percentage is lower than the grade span poverty percentage of 32.8%. In this example, the LEA grouped all the middle schools together in one grade span. The poverty percentage for the middle school grade span is 33.9%. In this example, School O is eligible because its poverty percentage exceeds the grade span's poverty percentage of 33.9%. In contrast, schools N and P are ineligible because the poverty percentage of each school is lower than the grade span's poverty percentage of 33.9%.
Now let's take a look at an SC 5000 tip. If a campus meets Title I Part A eligibility based on the option referenced here and is to be a Title I Part A served campus, the basis of eligibility noted on the SC 5000 would be either residing or enrollment based on the data the LEA used to calculate the actual low-income percentage reported for the campus on the SC 5000. The LEA would select grade span grouping under the additional Title I eligibility column. The LEA would report the low-income percentage for the campus. The LEA would maintain locally for documentation purposes the list of grouped campuses, low-income numbers, and enrollment for those campuses that comprise the grade span grouping for the campus in question.
We will now further examine the one-year transition option. The one-year transition option allows a campus that was Title I served in the previous year but is no longer Title I eligible to be eligible for a Title I Part A campus allocation. This option may only be used in the year directly following Title I eligibility. This provision applies to a newly ineligible school and not to an eligible school that has fallen in the poverty ranking compared to the previous year's ranking and does not receive a Title I allocation from its LEA because the LEA allocates its Title I funds to other eligible campuses with higher poverty percentages.
Now let's take a look at an SC 5000 tip for a campus using the one-year transition to establish Title I eligibility. If a campus meets Title I Part A eligibility based on the option referenced here and is to be a Title I Part A served campus, the basis of eligibility noted on the SC 5000 would be either residing or enrollment based on the data the LEA used to calculate the low-income percentage reported for the campus on the SC 5000, and the LEA would select one-year transition under the additional eligibility column. Let's take a look at an example of the SC 5000 for a campus using the one-year transition to establish overall Title I eligibility. On this SC 5000, for the 2022-2023 school year, Edgar ISD reported that its low-income percentage was 30.54%. For Edgar Intermediate, the LEA reported a low-income percentage of 34.24%. Although the campus low-income percentage was less than 35%, the campus was still eligible to receive a Title I Part A campus allocation because the campus low-income percentage was greater than or equal to the LEA's low-income percentage of 30.54%. If you notice that none was selected in the additional Title I eligibility column because the campus meets eligibility requirements due to the LEA's low-income percentage, we can establish that in 2022-2023, Edgar Intermediate was Title I eligible. Now let's fast forward to 2023-2024. On this SC 5000 for the 2023-2024 school year, Edgar ISD reports that its low-income percentage is 39.54%. For Edgar Intermediate, they report a low-income percentage of 33.24%. Because the campus's low-income percentage is not equal to or greater than 35%, and not equal to or greater than the LEA's low-income percentage, the campus is not Title I eligible based on the low income percentage. However, since the campus was eligible to operate its campus-based Title I program in 2022-2023, the LEA can use the one-year transition to establish eligibility in the following year, which in this case is the 2023-2024 grant year. On the SC 5000, the LEA would select one-year transition under the Title I eligibility column. The LEA can only use this option for the campus for the 2023-2024 school year. If the campus's low income percentage remains not equal to or greater than 35% and not equal to or greater than the LEA's low income percentage in the 2024-2025 school year, the campus will not be Title I eligible unless they meet eligibility using another option, for example, a feeder pattern or a grade span grouping.
The next option for serving remaining campuses is the EdFlex Individual Programmatic Waiver option. This option can be used to establish Title I Part A eligibility for a campus that does not meet the low-income criteria to be a Title I campus at all. Please note that utilizing this option involves multiple steps. There is additional action required by the LEA for selecting this option. The LEA would need to apply for and receive an EdFlex Individual Programmatic Waiver in order to qualify as a Title I campus. This is a separate waiver process that involves review by the state's EdFlex Committee and approval by the Commissioner of Education at the Texas Education Agency. It is also important to note that TEA may only consider an LEA's request to waive the Title I Part A campus eligibility requirements if the low income percentage for the campus in question is within 10 percentage points of the lowest served campus that does meet the statutory eligibility requirements. The waiver application process needs to be started early as there are several steps before the waiver application can be considered for approval. The process includes completing the waiver application, soliciting public comment, determining evaluation criteria based on the evaluation requirements, site-based decision-making committee review and approval, campus principal approval, superintendent approval, Board of Trustees approval, submission to TEA, TEA EdFlex Committee review, and ultimately TEA Commissioner of Education review and approval.
Now let's take a look at an SC 5000 tip for a campus using the EdFlex Individual Programmatic Waiver to establish Title I eligibility. If a campus meets Title I Part A eligibility based on the option referenced here and is to be a Title I Part A served campus, the basis of eligibility noted on the SC 5000 would be either residing or enrollment based on the data the LEA used to calculate the low income percentage reported for the campus on the SC 5000, and the LEA would select Individual Programmatic Waiver under the Additional Eligibility column. On this SC 5000, MOE ISD is trying to establish Title I eligibility for MOE High School. MOE High School has a low income percentage of 34.24%. MOE ISD reported that the LEA's low income percentage is 46.23%. Since MOE's high school low income percentage is not equal to or greater than 35% and not equal to or greater than the LEA's low income percentage, the campus is not Title I eligible using the LEA's poverty percentage or the 35% options. So the LEA is now going to use the EdFlex Individual Programmatic Waiver option to establish Title I eligibility for MOE High School. The LEA has gone through the process previously referenced, and at the time that the LEA is notified that the waiver has been approved by the TEA's Commissioner of Education, the LEA can select individual programmatic waiver under the additional Title I eligibility column. Now let's take a look at an SC 5000 tip for selecting the None option under the additional Title I eligibility column. The only time that None is acceptable as a selection is when any of the following conditions apply. 1. The LEA is exempt from the rank and serve requirements because the LEA has fewer than 1,000 students. 2. The LEA is exempt from the rank and serve requirements because the LEA only operates one campus. Or 3. The campus low income percentage is greater than or equal to the LEA's low income percentage. If a campus meets Title I Part A eligibility based on the option referenced here and is to be a Title I Part A served campus, the basis of eligibility noted on the SC 5000 would be any selection from the drop-down list except None, and the LEA would select None under the additional Title I eligibility column. After an LEA has ranked all its schools by poverty percentage, identified schools with a poverty percentage above 75%, and has determined if high schools above 50% poverty will be served, if funds remain, the LEA has several options for serving the remaining campuses. This concludes the process for ranking and identifying eligible campuses. Now that we've gone over all the options available to LEAs for establishing campus eligibility for the Title I Part A program, we can take a look at the requirements associated with operating a Title I campus-based program. As referenced previously, in order for a campus to operate a campus-based Title I Part A program, the campus must first meet overall Title I Part A eligibility requirements. Once these overall Title I Part A eligibility requirements have been established for a campus, then it can be decided whether the campus is eligible to operate a Title I school-wide program or if the campus will be operating a targeted assistance program. The two Title I Part A campus-based programs available to campuses that meet overall Title I Part A eligibility include school-wide and targeted assistance. The program that provides the most flexibility is a school-wide program because Title I Part A funds can be used to upgrade the entire education program to improve the achievement of the lowest achieving students. Not all Title I Part A eligible campuses are eligible to operate a school-wide program. In order for Title I eligible campuses to be eligible to operate a school-wide program, the campus has to have a low income percentage of at least 40%. Additionally, the campus must engage in a one-year planning process prior to operating a school-wide program. The one-year planning process includes conducting a comprehensive needs assessment that informs a school-wide program plan that is developed in consultation with various stakeholder groups. Additionally, the campus must have all of the statutory parent and family engagement requirements in place. An LEA can determine in consultation with the school that less time is needed to develop and implement the school-wide program. If the LEA makes that determination, the LEA should document the reasons for taking less than the 1 year for planning. If a campus is operating a targeted assistance program, the campus can only use Title I Part A funds to provide services to eligible children identified as having the greatest need for special assistance. Campuses choosing to operate a targeted assistance program are either ineligible for a school-wide program, meaning that they do not have a low-income percentage of at least 40%, or they may be eligible to operate a school-wide program but choose to operate a targeted assistance program instead. Campuses eligible for a targeted assistance program must meet overall Title I eligibility requirements. Although the threshold to operate a school-wide program is 40%, there are some options available to campuses who do not meet the 40% threshold for operating a school-wide program. They include the following. School-wide previous year. If a campus is Title I Part A eligible but does not meet the 40% threshold, the first thing to check is if the campus has ever been eligible to operate a school-wide program. If they have, then they could use the school-wide previous year option. A campus can use the school-wide previous year option for as long as it maintains its overall Title I eligibility. If the Title I eligible campus has never operated a school-wide program in the past, the next option an LEA may use is a feeder pattern option. The feeder pattern option for school-wide eligibility is like the feeder pattern option to establish overall Title I eligibility. This option can be used to establish a campus's school-wide program eligibility by projection, based on the number of low-income students in the campus's attendance areas that feed into the campus in question. If the feeder pattern low-income percentage is at least 40%, then the campus can operate a school-wide program based on the feeder pattern option. If neither the school-wide previous year option nor the feeder pattern option works for a campus to establish school-wide program eligibility, the campus can apply for an EdFlex school-wide eligibility waiver for this campus. Let's take a look at some of the options each of these is described. We'll look at the school-wide previous year and the EdFlex school-wide eligibility waiver in more detail when we get to the additional school-wide eligibility column in the SC 5000 that references those items.
We will now take a look at some SC 5000 examples. Let's begin with option 1, school-wide previous year. As per the screenshot of the SC 5000 for ESSA ISD, in 2020-2021, ESSA Elementary was eligible to operate a school-wide program since they met overall Title I eligibility and school-wide program eligibility, with a low-income percent that was at least 40%. Let's now fast forward to the year 2022-2023. In 2022-2023, ESSA Elementary's low-income percent dropped to 36.23. Since their low-income percentage is greater than 35%, they are Title I eligible. And since they were eligible to operate a school-wide program in a previous year, they can continue to operate a school-wide program for as long as they maintain overall Title I Part A eligibility. The LEA would select school-wide previous year to indicate that the campus is using the school-wide previous year option to establish school-wide program eligibility. This campus used the school-wide previous year option in 21-22 as well to establish school-wide eligibility. However, in this example, we provided an example of the option being used 2 years later to demonstrate that for as long as the campus remains overall Title I Part A eligible, they can continue to use the school-wide previous year option to establish school-wide program eligibility. Now let's take a look at an SC 5000 tip for a campus using the feeder pattern option to establish school-wide program eligibility. If a campus meets school-wide program eligibility based on the option referenced here and is to be a Title I Part A served campus, The basis of eligibility noted on the SC5000 would be feeder pattern. The LEA would report the projected low income percentage for the campus based on the feeder pattern. The LEA should maintain locally for documentation purposes the list of feeder campuses, low income numbers, and enrollment from those campuses that comprise the feeder pattern for the campus in question. Let's now take a look at an SC5000 example for option 2, feeder pattern. On this SC5000, ESSA ISD is trying to establish school-wide program eligibility for ESSA Middle School. ESSA Middle School has a low-income percent of 36%. Since ESSA Middle School's low-income percentage is greater than 35%, the campus is Title I eligible. However, since it does not meet the 40% threshold for providing a school-wide program on the campus, it now is trying to establish school-wide program eligibility using the feeder pattern option. Since ESSA Elementary School is the only campus, in this example, that feeds into ESSA Middle School, and that campus meets school-wide program eligibility, the LEA can use the feeder campus's low income percent of 45% to establish school-wide program eligibility for ESSA Middle School. If the LEA chooses to use the feeder pattern option to establish school-wide program eligibility for ESSA Middle School, they would need to include the campus low income percentage for the feeder pattern that makes the campus school-wide program eligible, and they would need to select feeder pattern as a basis of eligibility for the campus in question. Let's now take a look at an example for option 3, EdFlex school-wide eligibility waiver. On this SC5000, MOE ISD is trying to establish school-wide program eligibility for their elementary school, which has a low income percent of 36.24%. Since MOE Elementary's low income percent is greater than or equal to the LEA's low income percent of 32.25, the campus is overall Title I eligible. However, since they do not meet the 40% school-wide program eligibility threshold, they are not eligible to operate a school-wide program. If they are not eligible to operate a school-wide program using school-wide previous year, and are not able to establish school-wide program eligibility using the feeder pattern option, the only other option is to apply for an EdFlex school-wide eligibility waiver. This waiver is different than the EdFlex individual programmatic waiver that is used to establish overall Title I eligibility. To apply for and receive the EdFlex school-wide eligibility waiver, the LEA would select the school-wide EdFlex waiver option under the additional eligibility column. It is also important to note that when an LEA selects the school-wide EdFlex waiver option for a campus, they are applying for the waiver and assuring at that time that they have gone through the process outlined in the required supporting documentation form. The form should be maintained locally and available upon request from TEA and/or an auditor. The form can be found on the TEA EdFlex webpage. The form should be maintained locally and available upon request from TEA and/or an auditor. Previously, an LEA was required to submit the WV 4004 schedule if they were applying for the EdFlex school-wide eligibility waiver. The WV 4004 schedule has been discontinued and will no longer be required. The additional school-wide eligibility column was added to the schedule for 2023-2024. The list of options were taken from the additional eligibility column. This column will only be enabled if the campus status selected is school-wide and the campus low income percentage entered for the campus is less than 40%. For each campus where the column is enabled, select one of the options to reflect the additional school-wide eligibility method that the campus is using to establish school-wide program eligibility. The additional school-wide eligibility selection options include school-wide EdFlex waiver or school-wide previous year. If the column is enabled, one selection is required and only one selection is allowed. As previously shared, this column will only be enabled if the campus status selected is school-wide and the campus low-income percentage entered for the campus is less than 40%. The campus status column is a drop-down listing. From the drop-down list, select the option that indicates how the LEA will serve each campus based on the Title I Part A eligibility requirements. The campus status drop-down list options include school-wide program, targeted assistance program, not served, or skipped. For specific information and definitions for each of the options, please see the SC 5000 schedule instructions and the SC 5000 guidance handbook. We will also provide a brief description in the following slides.
For LEAs with a total enrollment of 1,000 students or more, a campus is identified as a skipped campus in the following situations. A campus has a low-income percentage over 75% and is not served, while other campuses with a lower low-income percentage are served. Another campus with the same grade span and a lower low-income percentage is served. LEAs with a total enrollment of less than 1,000 students do not have skipped campuses. All campuses should be designated as either a served or a not served campus. Skipping is an exception to the requirements described with respect to allocating Title I funds to campuses in rank order of poverty. It permits an LEA to elect not to serve or to skip an eligible campus that has a higher percentage of students from low-income families if the school meets Title I comparability of services requirements, and if the school receives supplemental funds from state or local sources that it spends according to the requirements of Section 1114, which is school-wide, or Section 1115, which is targeted assistance. And the supplemental funds that the school spends from other sources equal or exceed the amount that the campus would have received under Title I Part A. If an LEA skips a school, the LEA is still required to use Title I Part A funds to provide equitable services to eligible private school students who reside in the attendance area of the skipped school. An LEA must determine which school attendance areas would have received Title I Part A funds absent any skipping and/or not serving, as well as the per pupil allocations for those campuses. The LEA must then determine the amount of funds that would have been allocated for private nonprofit school students residing in eligible school attendance areas. The final option for a campus status is not served. This designation is for any campus that the LEA has elected not to serve as a Title I Part A campus and that does not meet the criteria for a skipped campus. Please note, closed campuses may still display on the SC 5000 several years after their removal is requested from AskTED. The LEA should designate any closed campus as not served. This concludes the formal part of the training. I'll now be sharing some Title I Part A resources that you may find helpful in administering the Title I Part A program that specifically relate to today's training. As we previously mentioned, this training was developed based on non-regulatory guidance released by the U.S. Department of Education in February of 2022. The document they released combines existing information on within-district Title I Part A allocations that currently exist in multiple places, in order to make the information easier for states and LEAs to access and use. The document link can be found on the TEA Title I Part A webpage under the USDE Resources section. The SC 5000 instructions are a helpful resource that can be accessed in the eGrants application. They provided step-by-step information related to how to complete the SC 5000. The SC 5000 Guidance Handbook provides detailed definitions and examples of information helpful in completing the SC 5000. The SC 5000 guidance document can be found in the Application and Support Information section of the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant Applications Grants page on the TEA Grant Opportunities webpage for the most current year's application available. It is important to reference the document for the most current application. If the SC 5000 has changed, the guidance document is updated to reflect the changes. The SC 5000 report in eGrants is also a great resource that can assist LEAs to determine if they are in compliance with the rank and serve statutory requirements. LEAs can also reach out to their Regional Education Service Center for technical assistance and support as it relates to completing the SC 5000 and the ESSA Consolidated Application. The final resource to be shared today is the Frequently Asked Questions document. The FAQ document is organized by Title I Part A related topics, and there are more than 300 questions with responses available. There's a section related to the Title I Part A eligibility Within-LEA allocations and the SC 5000 schedule. This document can be accessed from the TEA Title I Part A webpage.
This concludes the SC 5000 Title I Part A Campus Selection Schedule Instructions Training presented by the Federal Program Compliance Division at the Texas Education Agency. If you would like additional information on the process for allocating Title I Part A funds to campuses, please view the video for the Title I Part A Within-LEA Allocations Training. As always, please contact us with any questions you may have using the contact information referenced on this slide. Thank you.